back on the 0 Hour. I, as always, am your host, Richard RJ Eskow. And now for an update on what's happening, maybe happening, or perhaps is not happening in the world of healthcare, a world close to all of our hearts. We once again speak with our friend Laura Packard. Laura is the executive director of Healthcare Voters. She is the founder of Healthcare Voices, and there's a lot going on in the world of healthcare, as always. So without any further ado, Laura, welcome back to the program.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's always great to have you. And one of the things that I know people are talking about, including not necessarily people in our line of work of either activism or journalism, but just folks I know, there is, in my very unrepresentative sample, tells me an awareness that there's some benefits people have had that are coming to an end. There's this kind of disquiet around that. Maybe you could help us clarify what, perhaps in the response to the pandemic or whatever, what benefits are out there that maybe have a clock ticking on them.
Well, there's some specific things related to the declaration of the pandemic, and we don't know when that declaration when it'll be declared over. At the moment, we're thinking maybe mid-July. Government said that they would give the states 60 days notice. So we know it's at least 60 days from now, but they extended it last time. So now mid-July is when it will theoretically end. And what's tied to that are a whole bunch of different things, from emergency usage of vaccines and being able to see doctors remotely, to access to healthcare itself. Because as a part of this declaration, the states were not allowed to double check their Medicaid recipients to maybe kick people off the program during the pandemic. So what we have is millions of people have accessed healthcare through Medicaid in their states. And there's going to be what's called a redetermination process when the pandemic ends. And the states will have to go through their Medicaid rolls and contact each person and make sure they're still eligible for Medicaid, that they're still making under a certain amount of money. And so that's been paused for the last couple of years. And it's quite a big task, especially for the larger states, because they're going to have to contact hundreds of thousands or millions of people. And we know if you're low income, you're more likely to move. You're going to be harder to reach. Maybe you work multiple shift jobs. Maybe you had to, maybe you lost where you live because of the pandemic and you moved in somewhere else. So right. This is a really transient group of people, and people are going to slip through the cracks.
And what worries me also about that, Laura, and this one's been bothering me for a long time. Medicaid is a good program. It helps a lot of people, gives them good coverage for people who need it badly. And it also, I worry that certain states will be, I don't know the right word to use, but whether it's punitive or vindictive or overly aggressive for political or ideological reasons, that they will look to kick people off. I mean, I think we've seen that a lot in the way certain politicians talk even about Social Security, disability, and that kind of thing, making the process difficult, making it onerous, and so on. Is there any concern that might be a factor in what happens when this provision ends?
I'm very concerned about that, because this process called Medicaid unwinding, states have up to a year to do it, but Medicaid costs the states money. And so there's a financial incentive for them to kick as many people off as fast as they can. And you can see how some states that don't prioritize healthcare are just going to take a machete to their Medicaid rolls. Yeah. And they aren't even really going to try very hard to reach folks that need to be reached to make sure they can keep their healthcare.
And, one of the ironic political things about it to me, and I know, we're not talking in the political context, so I won't even name a party, but a state like Kentucky, where the Kentucky, I think it's called Kentucky Direct, is that right? Something like that. Good, solid name. But the Kentucky program is very popular politically. And I know at one point a governor who was hostile towards it, nevertheless took political credit for the benefits of it, but I see people like that kind of like potentially working almost undercover, if you get what I mean, outside the daylight, just hassling people and kicking them off it, which is, in my view, it's inhumane, but it's also bad for all of us because people don't have health care. They're sicker. The productivity goes down. Diseases spread. Am I being overly doom and gloom about this?
Well, we don't know yet. So this hasn't happened yet. We're speculating about what's going to happen. And you're right that Kentucky, under the gubernatorial leadership with their program Connect, has really reached out and made healthcare affordability one of the things that they're concerned about. But I feel like the places to watch are the places where the governors are hostile to healthcare because probably their state health bureaus and so on, those appointees are coming from the governors. So I would look to a state like Florida or Georgia or Texas, where the governors are actively hostile to health care, where they are probably going to rapidly go through the rolls and throw a lot of people off.
There's another dimension of this that I've been thinking about, Laura Packard, which is I think those governors, for example, who are hostile to healthcare and their allies and supporters and financiers and everything else, I expect them to make the argument that we're only going after quote unquote freeloaders or words to that effect, people. And number one, oftentimes when people say that, they're really willing to harm 100 people because maybe one of them technically doesn't qualify for the benefit. But I have a hard time wrapping my head around the idea that anybody getting health care, which they need or they wouldn't be receiving it, is a freeloader anyway. I find it hard to be sympathetic to that political point of view.
Well, I mean, healthcare is a human right. Everyone should have the healthcare that they need. And it is hard to hold and keep a job if you are sick, if you are partially or completely disabled, if you have a chronic illness. If your medical issues are untreated, it is extremely hard to hold down the job or several jobs that these legislators are requiring. And so I think it's sort of putting the cart before the horse. You need to be healthy in order to have a stable job. And if they're trapping people in poverty, where if you're too sick to work, but you can't get healthy again, what are you supposed to do? So I think it's also extremely short-sighted financially, because first of all, the states that haven't expanded Medicaid to cover many of their people, the government's paying almost all of the tab. So they are turning down free money to help their own people be healthier, to make some sort of a political point. And in the end, we all pay. If somebody has something that is treatable, but instead they wind up in the hospital for weeks, racking up hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars of a bill that they cannot pay, that eventually the taxpayers will have to pick up and we'll all pay in higher premiums, that is right. The dumbest way to finance your healthcare system.
Yeah, and what you were describing went by government. You meant federal government offering money to these states who won't take it out of whatever reason or to make whatever point, or won't go there. But the other thing, Laura, that strikes me about this whole system is just that we talk here in Washington about this policy and that policy and all, and the press covers it a certain way and as if it's all a given. But really, to me, this is just me talking, but it's so insanely brutal. It's just such systemic brutality to take people who are poor, more likely to be Black or Indigenous or people of color who are, maybe struggling with multiple health issues, and basically say, no, you have to jump through these hoops that you may be physically incapable of jumping through, and which no human being should be demeaned to jump through anyway. You have to do this before we'll give you maybe even life-saving care, or, your great-grandmother or your small child or whatever. To me, we lose touch in these policy debates of the incredible cruelty of it all. I don't know. What do you think?
Absolutely. I mean, not only is it financially incredibly a bad idea, but it's cruel. And we in America have the money to pay for the healthcare we need. It's just a matter of priorities. Billionaires buying Twitter instead of being taxed to pay for the things that we all need.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. The idea that somebody has the spare change, well, he did have to go to the bank and, got some of his assets aren't liquid. But, the idea that somebody has, and the space flights and this and that, I just think that if we get to a humane, moral future, which I hope we do, that people will look back on this and just shake their heads. Is there any chance when it comes to ending some of these pandemic measures, this one being, of course, the Medicaid approval process, is there any chance it might be extended, that Congress might be prevailed upon to extend these provisions?
Well, I hope so. And the answer is we just don't know. But also pay attention to what's happening in the states. For example, Oregon, they're putting together a bridge plan to cover people that make a little bit more than Medicaid, but their income can kind of fluctuate if you're right at the edge of those limits. So some years you're eligible, some years you don't, which means some years you lose your doctors, some years you get them back. And so they're putting together this bridge plan to cover this group of people that sort of bounce up and down right at the line of eligibility to stabilize the kind of healthcare that they get. So that'll be interesting to see. And I hope other states also experiment, because we're seeing huge coverage gains because of this Medicaid expansion through the pandemic. And we're going to lose all that. We're going to see millions of people lose their healthcare unless we do something.
There was an old saying that, I think a Puritan or something is somebody who lives in fear that somebody somewhere is having a good time. And I think there are people who live in fear that somebody somewhere is getting the care they need. It just bothers them and they lay awake thinking about it. The other provision that, and we'll get back to maybe contacting Congress and representatives and so on later, but the other piece of this, seems to me, Laura Packard, is, if I recall correctly, some of the supports for premium supports for the Affordable Care Act are also expiring, meaning that, it's rough for a lot of people as it is to, make their copays, reach their deductibles, and so on. So it's not an easy ride for many people already, but that's going to be, those provisions are going to end too at some point. I don't know when, but what's the deal there?
Well, the American Rescue Plan, which passed in 2021, had additional subsidies to make health insurance plans through the ACA more affordable, but those expire at the end of this year. So if those don't get extended in about October, millions of Americans are going to get a letter in the mail saying that their premiums have skyrocketed, and many people won't be able to afford that, because one of the things the American Rescue Plan did was it provided help to everybody to make sure that you don't have to pay more than 8.5% of your income on premiums. Before that, it capped out. And so if you lived in a place with expensive health care, you could wind up with no help with your premiums. There was no limit. If you made over a certain amount in income, it wasn't capped. So we're seeing people, working families that make some money, but not a lot of money, will go back to having to pay full price for their health insurance, which will be just unaffordable.
Yeah, and to me, the thing that I think people don't always understand, including policymakers, to be honest, I was in the room when some of these original provisions were designed, and there were conversations about what percentage of income is appropriate. If you think, if a family of four is trying to get by in Staten Island on, pick a number, $75,000 worth of income, and all of a sudden they're going to pay a $6,500, $7,000 a year basic premium plus a deductible in the thousands and copays. I mean, we're really talking about people drowning financially if something happens to them. Laura, you're a cancer survivor. You had your famous exchanges while you were, fighting that with President Trump and all that. But you know what it's like when people get seriously ill. Serious money is involved, and to me, any help that people can get is desperately needed. It strikes me as a no-brainer that this provision should be extended, and in my view, even much more should be done. But I can't imagine, at least among Democrats, and we'll see what happens in November. But I can't imagine for any Democrat that this is a debatable question that we should continue. I guess, am I politically naive or something?
Well, the issue is that Republicans are in lockstep against anything that improves our healthcare system. So that means to get through the Senate, you need 60 votes, and with no Republican votes, there's no way to get the math to work. So
Right.
the workaround is using reconciliation, but Senators Manchin and Sinema put a stop to that at the end of last year. So we'll see what happens now that they're back from break. We'll see what happens in the next month or so before Memorial Day, if they're able to hammer out a deal, because it sounds like everybody gets that this is the right thing to do. This is important to do. And that it's politically important to do too, that you don't jack up people's health insurance rates right before the election. Right. But we'll see if they come to an agreement or not.
Well, it certainly is an interesting time. Now, you were, correct me if I'm wrong about this, but I think you were recently at the White House. Is that right?
Yes, I was honored to go to the White House a few weeks ago for the signing of the executive order on expanding and strengthening Medicare and Medicaid. So this was the big ceremony with Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, and Barack Obama made his return to the White House.
And you introduced him, right?
No, I was just in the audience.
Oh, okay. It's the media clip says Laura introduces Barack Obama. But okay, now that was about another issue we have. Our politics forces us, and this is just me, but our politics forces us to make these kind of patchwork solutions to massive problems like healthcare. And with patchwork solutions, sometimes the patches don't quite connect. So that was, if I understand correctly, you were at the White House to unveil this rule to fix the family glitch. Is that right?
Yes. So this is a proposed rule. I don't think it's finalized yet. It's in the comment period or will be soon. And this would take effect for next year. And so the issue is whether you are able to get subsidy help for Affordable Care Act plans depends on whether you have a good insurance offer through your employer, whether it meets the minimum standards for what it covers, and whether it's affordable. And so it's based on whether it's affordable to you, and what it might not be affordable for your family, because often employers will make sure that your policy is very cheap, but it is expensive for your family. And so if the policy is affordable to you, but not affordable to your family, that's the family glitch, in which none of your family members or you are then eligible for ACA subsidy help. So that's millions of people that are priced out of health insurance because it looks affordable on paper, but when you include their whole family, it isn't. So this would fix that. And so maybe your employer is offering you a policy that's affordable for you, but not for your family. And then your family would be eligible to get insurance through the marketplace instead.
So this is this is probably just an accident of how the legislation was written, and that's why it's a glitch. And does the administration have regulatory authority to fix this without congressional approval?
Mm-hmm. Yes, but because this is a rule and not through legislation, it means it could be undone by future administrations.
Sure, of course.
And I mean, it's called a glitch, but it was somewhat deliberate in the planning. I mean, they chose to write the policies this way because it was cheaper. Less people would qualify for subsidies. But we're finally getting to a point where, I mean, this has been something that's been an issue for the decades since the Affordable Care Act was passed, and they're finally getting around to fixing it.
And you know, this is where, if you don't mind for a second, I'm going to take a chance here, Laura Packard, and just get a little philosophical here, because I and probably most of my audience, we're big Medicare for all people. We want big changes. I sometimes get heat for focusing on incremental changes, and I debated once someone who's now a very senior economist in the administration, and he said, I'm an incrementalist. And, you know, I said, I'm not. I operate on principles, but they're obviously not mutually exclusive, right? So I sometimes get heat for, and I do, that's my job, I'll take it, but for supporting incremental fixes, whether it's a glitch fix, whether it's extending a subsidy here or something there. But as revolutionary as my politics may be, I just don't feel omnipotent enough to ignore the plight of people like the millions you're describing who are struggling with the family glitch. Yeah, I advocate, and I've advocated fiercely for many years for a very different system, but I just can't ignore that, thinking that, you know, my vision is so cosmic that their suffering will be redeemed by what I produce in the future. I just don't know that to be the case. So at the same time that I talk the big picture stuff, I adamantly support the work that's being done to defend what could be lost, to incrementally improve what's there. And I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, but since, you know, so much of your work I know is dedicated to making people's lives better in these various rather specific ways, you know, I don't know if you had any thoughts or anything you wanted to say about that.
Well, all of these changes are small ball. They help some people, not all people, but there's so much structural change that needs to happen for universal healthcare in America. It is so far away, even if we had all the pieces. I don't want anybody to suffer and die in the meantime. So I will take all the incremental progress we can get, because to make serious change, we do not have the votes in the House or the Senate or the presidency. And structurally, the Senate has a filibuster. So even if we had 50 Democrats that supported universal care, we still don't have 60 votes. So first you have to overturn the filibuster. Right. And to get all these votes, you have to fix our campaign finance system. And all of the pieces of healthcare in America are so broken right now, from doctors that have to go into hundreds of thousands of dollars to debt to become a doctor. So then they are motivated to go into areas that make more money because they have to pay off this huge debt. And hospitals that are nominally nonprofit or even for-profit hospitals that are trying to make as much money as possible to kick up, you know, tens of millions of dollars to their CEOs and their shareholders, and a big pharma that also is a for-profit industry that's trying to deliver the maximum amount of profits to their shareholders. To like every single piece of healthcare in America that is profit driven has problems because of that profit driven motive, and so it is really hard to fix a bucket that has so many leaks.
Yeah, and I think to me it gets, you know, the core is, you know, until we can get all those votes for what we need, you know, unless you want to use people as pawns to increase pressure or whatever for change, which I certainly don't, then, we've got to act to help as many people as we can now. So it's a constant struggle of conscience. And I guess maybe one last topic, because I think we're going to hopefully end with where people can get more information and what they can do. I know you're also on the board of this group, Unrig the Economy. And I think some people, certainly here in Washington, policymakers, but I think a fair number of people around the country think, well, things are better now. Inflation's bad, but the employment numbers are much better, and they are. An enormous number of jobs have been added. Workers are feeling the ability to change jobs and so on. But I think people have been lulled into a false sense of security when it comes to, and I love your thoughts on this, when it comes to worker financial stability. Yes, the job figures are much better now, but more than 20 million people experienced a period of unemployment last year, which has devastating long-term effects, right? And if people are moving jobs a lot, well, that shows some strengthening of the labor market, but it also shows that the jobs they're getting, they don't like. They're not good jobs. So they need to be better. Wages need to be better. So I feel when we talk about things like extending the Medicare exemption, like extending the ACA subsidies, my personal feeling is we need to understand that things are not great out there for American working people. Although, there's a lot of credit to be given to the top line numbers and how they've improved in the last year, that people need help. But that's my opinion. And I don't know, first of all, do you encounter that state of mind that I've just described? And what are your thoughts on it?
Well, I was honored to join the board as an advisor to Unrig our economy. And so we're really trying to spread the message that the system is rigged. Incomes have been flat apart from inflation since the 70s and 80s, but people at the top, the top 1% are making all of the wealth. And it's making our country, our democracy, more unstable. And all of this is a result of policy choices. In America, we choose to have a billionaire like Jeff Bezos and his workers to be working close to minimum wage. Those are choices that we are making, that we haven't raised the minimum wage, I believe, since the 90s, that the things that under Reagan and so on, all of the regulations that cut against unionizing and organizing by workers to demand a fair share, the scales have been so wildly tipped in favor of big business and the rich for so long. It's important to realize those are choices, and we can make different choices. Under Trump and the Republican-controlled Congress chose to give giant tax breaks to rich people. We can undo that. We can tax them more fairly to pay for the things that we need. We can raise the minimum wage and force these billionaires to share more of their wealth with the workers that created that wealth.
Well, I think that's extremely well said, and there's not much I can add to that. But I would say this, in terms of, well, first of all, where can people go to get more information?
Well, if you're interested in the economic work that Unrig Our Economy is doing, you can go to unrigoureconomy.org. Also, if you're interested in the healthcare policy and economic work that I do, you can follow me on Twitter, Packard. I'm also on Facebook and Instagram at Laura Packard Activist. So follow me, get in touch, and we can keep working to make a fairer world. Okay, so that was good. Part one. Part two is, should people be communicating with, should people be communicating with their representatives and senators about this now? Should they be letting them know they want to see something done, or what's the next step for listeners? Yeah. Yes, you should contact your representative and your senators, especially your senators, because as they've come back from break, they're talking about what to do about the budget reconciliation bill. And Senator Manchin has proposed undoing the Trump tax breaks for rich people to help pay for some of the things that we need, like more spending on healthcare. It's a little unclear where Senator Sinema is on that. So it's important that your senators, especially here, that you prioritize healthcare and that you think that we need a fairer economy, that we need to tax the rich and big corporations and they should pay their fair share.
And having worked for a senator, and you know this, but I can just confirm for people, those letters, those emails, those calls, they make a difference. They count. They register, and your elected representative may not flip if, but they're certainly going to think about it, particularly if they get a lot of them. So I'm going to encourage that as well. Laura Packard, Executive Director of Healthcare, voter and advisory board member for Unrig Our Economy. As always, thanks for all your terrific work. And as always, thanks for coming on the program.
Thank you.
And we will be right back after this. I'm Richard RJ Eskow, and this is The Zero Hour.